Welcome to another episode of Witty CFB. Your host Rob Sheply here, and on today's episode, we're going to be covering Nebraska, and we got Dylan Jurgens coming on. He came back on in December, and dude, it's really excited to have you on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to talk about the team I've always grown up and enjoyed watching, and now I get the privilege to cover them, just for fun for college, and then before I graduate here in next May. So.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that off camera, so congratulations on that. You got one more year to go. You'll be good doing that. And then, obviously they have Dylan Raiola going into a second year. You have Dana Holgerson too. And, John Butler coming in as defensive coordinator. And, can you also give everybody just a brief summary on kind of what your projects are and, where people can find you?
Yeah, so I work for Last Word on Sports. I'm the managing editor for one of the smaller websites, LWS Sports. Yeah, very creative. But I do a lot. I do some work there. I do some Nebraska articles there. So I know I have a series going on right now. It's a preseason series. It's 2025 Nebraska top 5. So I've done like top 5 offensive players, top 5 defensive players. I've done impact freshmen. I have plans to do like important games, like the most crucial like moments or like predictions. I have specific predictions for certain players. I have some pretty cool ideas as we head closer here. We were only like a month away, so pretty excited. And also I do a podcast called The Last Take. If you're wondering, it is kind of making fun of the first take. That was my idea when I started that my freshman year. And we do some stuff there, mostly Nebraska stuff. We dabble in a little bit of college football in general, and then in the off season we'll do whatever. But we have some cool stuff coming up this year for that. And you can just find me on social media. So X is probably the best place. A lot of my stuff gets posted there. So whenever I find that stuff, and then The Last Take also is on X as well. So I will give it to Rob, and if he wants to share it out, he can. So
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to plug that into the description of the video and everything, so people can find you. And good wordplay on the Last Take, by the way. I at least remember when I kept going back and forth. So yeah, Dylan, we talked a little bit about off camera about Nebraska in general, and at least for me, just someone on the outside looking in terms of this Nebraska football program, I'm a huge fan of Raiola. I think he's the real deal. He is going to figure it out. And with that said, now that he's going to a second year, he has Dane Key, wide receiver, coming in from Kentucky. So there's going to be some more weapons for him. What do you think is the biggest thing that he has to improve on in order for him to avoid a sophomore slump and for Nebraska to be in a conversation of winning, instead of 6 or 7, 8, 9, possibly even 10 wins if they get on a run?
A lot of people, he made a lot of headlines last year, with all the Mahomes comparisons and stuff like that. And I really actually don't think that really helped him in his freshman year. I'm also just reading defenses. Obviously, it's his first year. So, he had 13 touchdowns, but that 11 interceptions really, stood out. But if he can really limit those turnovers, he's going to be a monster. And I'm going to be honest, last year, the wide receiver group was not that good outside of Jacory Barney. There was some moments with Isaiah Neyor and Jamal Banks, but again, they just could not separate. If you watched any Nebraska games last year that were after the Colorado game or after the Illinois game, you really could tell how the wide receivers on Nebraska couldn't separate off the jump, and they also couldn't block. So that didn't help when you're running screenplays to your tight end who can't run. He has no change of direction. So, but hey, Thomas Pedoni made the NFL, so good for him. But anyways, so I really think improving on those turnovers is really going to make Dylan kind of step up to a whole nother level. We saw with the passing yards, true freshman record, for program history. So he has some big shoes and he has a lot of expectations, but I really think a lot of people don't like him, as you probably see on the social media. But I think that's going to actually benefit him, because then he's going to be, he has that 1 year under his belt, so I really think it's going to really help him. And then you have a whole full off season with Dana Holgrenson. Like, that's going to really help him. And he also has his own coaches too. Like, he's coached by Patrick Mahomes, his personal private QB coach. So that definitely helps.
Yeah, that's what I mean too. I feel like people are being a little bit too critical of him because, I really, at least on this show, I really try to be at least somewhat realistic. I mean, obviously people who cover the program are going to be a little bit biased in the sense of like, sometimes they're more optimistic or less optimistic depending on who you talk to. But I mean, I do agree with your take just on general saying, hey, Raiola has all the pieces together. It's just more or less, hey, can that wide receiver core step up? And it also helps too that there's some returning guys on the offensive line too. So I think that's going to end up being a really underrated part of his development as well. But you brought up Dana Holgrenson too, which I definitely wanted to ask you about too. We got a little bit of a glimpse in terms of what he's going to bring to this Nebraska offense. So with that said, how do you think his style is going to fare with Raiola in terms of play calling and how best utilize him?
If you look at Dana Holgrenson in the past, like when he was at TCU Houston, he had that kind of air raid kind of style offense. Really, I don't expect that because I'm going to be honest, Wisconsin attempt running air raid in the Big Ten, and well, that did not work for them. And look at Phil Longo, who's now at Sam Houston State. So, but I think you're going to see glimpses of that, like the more spread out air raid offenses. So you saw that towards the end of the season. Really got to see it in the USC game a little bit, but then you really saw it like the Wisconsin game where Nebraska really just dominated that whole game entire time. And I feel like also just the use of the running back is really. I mean, they have Emmett Johnson, that's going to be a really good air raid style running back for Nebraska, and it's going to really help Dylan because then he gets more chances to air it out to all those wide receivers they have. I was talking with my co-host yesterday, and for my podcast, and I really don't know how they're going to play all the wide receivers. I know that's completely off topic, but I looking at it, like you have Dane Key, Neziah Hunter, Jacory Barney, and then you have the true freshman Cortez Mills, who is a highly rated recruit. Like, I just don't know how they're going to play them all. And I think having that full off season of Dana Holgrenson setting in that offense is going to really, really benefit Nebraska in the long run, and it's going to really show this year.
Yeah, exactly too, because I think we can both agree that Dane Key is clearly going to be their number one guy, all-time leading receiver in terms of for Kentucky. But, I definitely want to ask you this too. You routed off a couple of different receivers and also some of the guys in that running back room too. Who do you, outside of Raiola, who do you think is going to be Nebraska's quote-unquote X factor in terms of a guy who could potentially be a breakout candidate for this team?
That's a good question. I'm going to say Neziah Hunter. He was a Cal transfer. He's going to be a sophomore this year. He had a pretty similar season to Jacory Barney. If you watched Nebraska this past year, Jacory Barney was pretty much the only guy on the wide receiver core that really stood out. He didn't score that many touchdowns, but just the plays he was able to do, like the explosive plays that he could have had, but were called back by penalties. Neziah Hunter had a pretty similar season. I have it written here. He has caught 40 passes for 578 yards and 5 touchdowns for a Cal Golden Bears team that wasn't the greatest. And now he transfers to Nebraska, who, in my opinion, has a better offense and has a better quarterback. I'm not trying to diss Fernando Mendoza. I think he's going to do great things at Indiana this next year. But I think Dylan is a better quarterback than Fernando Mendoza, and I think that's going to really help Nebraska. And I think he's a sneaky X factor for the Huskers. Outside of him, I mean, obviously Dane Key, but it's going to really – with Nebraska, you think running the football, Emmett Johnson is going to play a huge role. If he gets injured, I don't know where Nebraska goes next. I mean, Quentin Ives is the next guy up, and he has little to no experience. So Emmett Johnson's the only veteran running back on the roster. So he's going to be a big part of the offense, and it would be big contributor of like setting the run and stuff like that. So
yeah, and even too, I mean, you talk about some of those guys too. I mean, Raiola too had a 67% completion percentage. So it's not like, when he had the time and the ability and he wasn't having that many turnovers, like he was actually really super capable too. And, obviously we can go into the Iowa game or the Ohio State game, for example, where, if a couple different things could have went their way, we'd be maybe having a different conversation about
the
them.
Ohio State game, like if they scored that touchdown on the goal line and not got stuffed, I mean, they probably win that game. So yeah, I'll let you continue.
No, you're good. No, you're good. I'm glad you remembered. I'm sure you obviously remember that game, but I was just kind of thinking about before we were talking. I was like, man, like, Nebraska, I think they're due for a win versus Iowa. And then, obviously too, they're back in bowl contention, which is great and everything. But, at least to me, this just feels like a team that just needs a couple different things to go their way. And some of these guys that they've been able to develop really kind of find their own, and then, you hit the ground running and win the games that you're supposed to win. And I think we're going to be talking about a different Nebraska team than what we've been talking about in years past.
Yeah, those first few games, like I mean that they start the season with Cincinnati. Like for Nebraska, they need to win that game.
Yes.
And I think they do, in my opinion, but it's a glorified home game at Arrowhead. But if they win that game, I mean, you go 3-0, and then you go into Michigan. If they could beat Michigan, look out, Big Ten. Like Nebraska's back, type of thing. So I'm not trying to step over the line there, but not trying to sip too much on the Kool-Aid. But I mean, and then the schedule, that crucial stretch between after Michigan. So you have the Michigan State, Maryland, and Minnesota games, and Northwestern. Those 4 games are really, really crucial if they want any chance of being in the playoff conversation or even the Big Ten conversation. So, and then in that final stretch, the Big Ten's been doing this. It is really hurt Nebraska throughout the Matt Rhule era, even in the Scott Frost eras. Is that the brutal November? Like they start with USC, and then you have to go to Southern California to take UCLA, which is, I don't even know how to feel about that team right now.
Yeah.
And then you get a bye week, then you have to head to State College to play Penn State, and then end the season with Iowa. I mean, those are not gimme games at all. I mean, Penn State, that's a chalk up loss because they're a playoff team this year. So I don't. They have a very interesting interesting spot they're in.
Yeah, because I mean, when I look at the schedule, if they take care of business, I can definitely see them starting 5-1 when they're going to that Minnesota game. Because to me, the Minnesota game on the 18th, that's to me the game where I sit there, because Minnesota's a really tough team. I don't think they get enough credit for what they've done. Especially they've had a number of guys almost every year who end up going to the NFL. Like, to me, if I sit there and say, okay, let's just say you don't win the Michigan game, no big deal. If you don't win the Michigan game, you take care of business versus Michigan State. You beat a Maryland team that I don't think any of us really know how they're going to do quite yet. And then, Cincinnati, exactly what you said, it's a glorified home game for a team that's still kind of developing. I could realistically see them going into this Minnesota game being 5-1, and then, hey, if they pull off Minnesota and beat Northwestern, all of a sudden you're looking at that USC game, and yeah, exactly what you said, possibly being a dark horse playoff team if everything kind of comes together.
Yeah, and I know you've probably seen it. A lot of analysts really have Nebraska like saying they're the 2025 Indiana. Like, no, I don't really think that. I'm not trying to overstep my beliefs. So sometimes, you get a little crazy. It's like, oh yeah, we're gonna go 10-2. But I'd be okay with 8-4, 9-3. Yeah, I'd be a little bit more disappointed with 8-3 or 8-4. But I mean, in the end, it's still an improvement, and it's better than going 7 years without a bowl game. They just won their first bowl game since I was in middle school, so I mean, I would like them to be a little bit better. But 8 wins is 8 wins, 9 wins is 9 wins. I can't really complain.
And not to mention too, I mean, everybody, I guess since I'm not in the Nebraska circle, I haven't heard the comparison to Indiana, because you would Because like when I think of Indiana, I think of like a team that nobody thought anything of in general. Whereas like I look at this Nebraska team, and people who've even watched an ounce of Nebraska football at all can probably sit there and say it's not like they're starting from ground zero here. Like you have a really good foundation. Matt Rhule is obviously a great culture builder, a good recruiter, somebody that players play for too. And you have Dana Holgerson, and also you have Butler coming in. You have Butler coming in too, who's I shouldn't be saying coming in. He's John Butler, their secondary coach last year, 31st season all time of coaching football. And I definitely that would be a good segue into that as well. So what are your general thoughts? Because I think when we talked last, it was right when they announced that Tony White was going to Florida State.
Yep.
So I at least from the outside looking in, I'd say it makes a lot of sense for John Butler to get another run as a defensive coordinator. His only other time was, I think, 1 year at Penn State in like 2013 or something. So well-experienced guy, and I think he's got a lot of solid pieces to work with.
Yeah, he definitely has his work cut out for him. I just don't even know how to feel. It's because I just don't know what to expect, because he had 2 years of Tony White. I mean, that first year under Tony White, top 15 defense, top 4 in the Big Ten, which is a lot. You may say, it's only 4th, but that's still really, really good in a defensive conference. That every team has a good defense in the Big Ten unless your name's Purdue. So even Purdue, they've had good defenses in the past, but at least as of late they haven't. But I just don't know what to expect, because when you look at last year, Tony White was still good. That defense was still pretty decent, but they really did fall off a bit. I was expecting that, but not as much as it did. And obviously, I think it was I personally think it might be a good thing that Tony White left. It's going to be difficult, but I feel like the pieces that John Butler has, and along with having Phil Snow, who was brought in halfway through the season along with Dana when they were analysts, to look over the defense and the offense, and having Phil Snow now full-time on the staff, it's going to really help with so much experience he has, especially defensively. And I'm really interested to see how much Matt Rhule will actually step in on defense, because he's a defensive guy. He's said it, but I really haven't seen it. There's been a lot of headlines of the offense. I'm not very worried about the offense. Is the defense I'm a little bit more worried about, especially on that defensive line. But I'm only worried on the defensive line because of the lack of starting experience. You have guys like Elijah Judy and Riley Van Poppel who come back for another year, but you have new guys like Dason McCullough coming from Oklahoma, he was really good at Indiana. You have I'm blanking. Williams Nowari, who former 5-star that transfers from Missouri to Nebraska. I don't know. The defensive line could be just as good as it has been, but it's going to be really, really different without those big guys in the middle of Nash Huntmacher and Ty Robinson, and they definitely have their work cut out for them as well. And then linebackers, I'm pretty confident there, so not too worried. They brought in a couple of guys like Marquise Watson-Trent from Georgia Southern. They have Vincent Shavers, who, in my opinion, I'm very, very high on, and I think he's going to be a very scary guy to go against this year, as he's going to be in a starting spot. And even Will McGahee the fourth, yes, he is related to the Willis McGahee who played in the NFL. But he's a very interesting guy to watch for Nebraska, especially in the linebacker position. And then you bring back guys like Sierra Wright, who transferred in from USC pretty late before the season started. He really didn't break out until later in the year as in the defensive back room, and he's going to be the number one guy. And he's definitely going to the NFL. And then you have Sean Singleton, who also comes back. So you have those veteran guys. I'm just worried if it's going to click with John Butler. And I don't know what's going to change. Are they still in 3-3-5? I'm not 100%. I'm pretty sure they are. But we'll really see on that first game in Kansas City.
Yeah, and I guess to add a little extra too. I mean, the Huskers at least too have been pretty solid defensively. I mean, they were ranked in the top 20 in terms of rush defense and scoring defense. And, they also do, just like you said, they have a really, at least for me, an intriguing mix of, some of those experienced veterans that you mentioned, some promising young players that I think they're just going to have to, kind of trust, particularly those edge rushers that you mentioned. And, also there's some transfer guys too that, who were at some smaller schools like Georgia Southern, for example, that you mentioned, where, hey, if they can really get going and they can contribute immediately, that would definitely be something exciting to see too. And, I'm definitely glad you mentioned, Phil Snow, obviously too, who was his defensive coordinator with Matt Rhule with Carolina as well. So I think just having that really experienced coaching staff as well. And, obviously you can talk about the history of Nebraska and their tradition and all that stuff too. But at the end of the day, Nebraska can't necessarily, rely entirely on the portal like some of these other schools can, like the Texas Techs of the world or what have you too. It's still a very, blue collar type of program.
Yeah, Nebraska doesn't have oil money, and then where they can just throw around and get former 5-star wide receivers. Well, that was an interesting thing over the offseason, but we don't need to go in that. There's other guys I didn't even talk about, like the true freshmen that could get their playing time. Like people are very, very high on Dawson Merritt, who was a top 100 recruit this past year. He was committed to Alabama until Nebraska kind of swooped in and got him to flip his commitment to Nebraska. And he has the potential to be the next best defensive lineman for Nebraska, probably one of the better ones since, Ndamukong Suh and some other guys like that. I'm not saying he's going to be that good. No one can be that dominant. I believe, but like Dawson Merritt is going to be a very, very interesting guy to watch this year, especially see how much rotational time he gets. Also, another guy like Christian Jones, who's the top guy out of Nebraska as recruits this past year out of Omaha West Side, and he played both sides, but he's going to play defense for Nebraska, and I'm really interested to see where he fits in or he gets redshirted. I don't know. And then, like I said, Williams, don't worry. So some younger guys that really will find themselves in rotational roles and maybe even starting roles later on in the season, and depending on injuries and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think another thing too, you that's a really good point too, is Nebraska. Yes, they're always in a win now mode, just kind of given the general expectations too. But it also, I think, what feels a little bit different about this year is there's so many younger players coming in a sense that, hey, if these younger players could even develop just a little bit, and it's not a complete shit show in defense, and the offense kind of comes together, I think we could all agree that even, obviously 8-4 would be a little bit disappointing, but if you can do it 8-4 and retain some, that nucleus that you developed, 8-4, 9-3, all of a sudden doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah, I mean, my current prediction is 9-3, and I feel like I'm a little crazy for that still. Like, it just feels wrong for me to say that as for how long they were in the crapper. Like, Nebraska it was so close. I just still in the back of my head, I just think of that 2021 season, and I'm not one of those people that say, "Oh yeah, the best 3-9 team of all time." Yeah, they did, but they couldn't win games. That's not a good thing. Yeah, you lost every game by one score, or single digits, but it's still not a good thing. And people think some Husker fans think it's just like they're so gung ho. I'm like, no, I don't want that. I want to be competing for at least the Big Ten. You don't have to touch the college football playoff for now, but at least be competitive. That's really what I want from a media perspective and from a fan perspective.
Yeah, especially too. I mean, I like to point out too, Nebraska also has had 2025 and 2024 top 25 recruiting classes too. So it's not like they're losing a step or anything. It's not like Matt Rhule's getting run over by a bunch of other Big Ten schools. I mean, yeah, you're sixth in the Big Ten in terms of recruiting this year, but to be sixth in the position that they're in, I think it's definitely something that I think just the average fan should be a little bit more optimistic about, because I'm sure you hear the narratives all the time about Nebraska. It's, they're going to just oh, they're going to find another way to lose, or
Yeah.
it's always something, right? But to me, this feels like a team that is on the precipice of not it. Even if it's not this year, it even could be next year too, because I think they have the right talent together. It's just more or less of, can they take care of business in the games that they're supposed to?
Yeah, and also just the thought of here, it's the Matt Rhule year 3. Like his last 3 stops, ignore Carolina, or last 2 stops in college football. Yeah, bad first year, decent second year. Third year is when they hit the double-digit wins. Like you saw it at Baylor. He made the Sugar Bowl, made the Big 12 championship. At Temple, they went 10-2. So like it could happen at Nebraska. I think there's a little bit too much hype, in my opinion. I think it needs to kind of like calm down a little bit and just let it happen, in my opinion. But
yeah, that's what I mean. To me, I think the hype train would really get on if they beat USC, for example. I don't think they have to beat Michigan or Minnesota, but to me, if they beat USC and come into Penn State having 8 or 9 wins by that point, then I think everyone's gonna be talking.
yeah, I'm just gonna hate when that Penn State game's big noon. All right, now it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I can already hear Gus Johnson's voice just echoing in my head right now. Then Urban Meyer probably finding any way to not say anything nice about Nebraska or Penn State on that call, I'm sure.
Yeah, I like big noon, but like it just really sucks. Like all these top games, like even the Ohio State Texas game, I wish that was a night game. Yeah, 11 a.m. is awesome. Like I used to be one of those people that said, "Oh yeah, 11 a.m." Like yeah, that's one of the most underrated time slots. Everybody hates 2:30, and then you have your night games. But I'm starting to kind of like flip away from 11 a.m. Like yeah, kind of sucks when all the good games are now at 11 a.m. and then night games you have, I don't know, like Vandy versus like anybody, to be fair. So
or something, yeah.
Like
depends on what side of the coin you're on. It, if you're if you have a couple drinks at you at 8 o'clock, all of a sudden a noon game sounds great. But but if you're sitting at home like everybody else, then 12 o'clock kind of can get old after a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dylan, any last thoughts before we wrap this up?
Well, I just say viewers, watch Nebraska this year. They could be a very dangerous team for the Big Ten. They could make a run for it. I don't know if they will, but I think they have the things in place to do so